The rain hadn't stopped all evening. The small diner on the corner glowed softly through the mist, its sign flickering in the damp air. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and warm pie mixed with the low hum of conversation. It was almost closing time, and the few customers left were just finishing their meals, lost in their own little worlds. Behind the counter, a young waitress moved quickly between tables, wiping surfaces and refilling cups. She looked tired, but her smile never faded. She had been working double shifts all week, trying to cover her rent and save a little for her younger brother's school books. Life wasn't easy, but she had learned to keep her head up and be kind no matter what. As she was stacking plates, the door opened with a sharp ring of the bell. A cold gust of wind rushed in, followed by a man dressed in worn clothes. His coat was soaked, his shoes looked ready to fall apart, and his face was hidden behind a hood. The chatter inside the diner quieted. People turned their heads, some frowning, others whispering. The man looked unsure of where to go. He stood by the door for a few seconds, dripping water onto the floor. Then he slowly walked to a booth near the corner and sat down. His movements were tired, almost cautious, as if he was afraid someone might throw him out. The waitress noticed him right away. She saw the way other customers stared and the way her manager raised his eyebrows from behind the counter. She gave a small sigh and picked up her notepad. When she reached his table, the man kept his eyes down. His hands were rough and shaking slightly. "Evening," she said softly. "Would you like something warm to drink?" He hesitated, then shook his head. I don't have any money," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "I was just hoping maybe if I could do something to earn a little food." The waitress glanced over her shoulder. Her manager was watching closely, clearly unhappy. She could almost hear his voice in her head. "Don't serve him, he'll scare away the customers." But something in the man's voice made her pause. He didn't sound like he was trying to get sympathy. He sounded tired, humble, and honest. She smiled gently. "We'll figure something out," she said. "How about a cup of coffee first?" He looked up for the first time. His eyes were a soft gray, filled with exhaustion, but also something deeper, a quiet sadness. "You don't have to," he murmured. "I know," she said. "But I want to." She poured him a cup and placed it in front of him. The man wrapped his hands around it as if trying to soak in its warmth. For a few moments he said nothing, just sat there breathing in the steam. When she returned with a towel to wipe the rain from the floor, he looked around the diner and noticed an old piano in the corner. Its keys were dusty and one of the pedals was broken. It hadn't been played in years. "That piano," he said quietly. "Does it still work?" She glanced at it and laughed softly. "Barely. No one really plays it anymore." The man hesitated, then said, "If I could play a song, maybe that could earn me a meal." The waitress looked at him curiously. "You play?" "A little," he replied, shrugging. Her manager was already walking over, frowning. "We're not running a charity here," he said in a low voice. "If he can't pay, he shouldn't stay." Before she could stop herself, she turned and said, "He wants to play something. Maybe it'll bring in some good mood before closing." The manager looked annoyed. "On that old thing? It's out of tune." "Then it won't hurt to try," she said, meeting his eyes. After a long sigh, the manager waved his hand. "Fine, but if anyone complains, he's out." The man nodded gratefully and stood up. He walked slowly to the piano, his coat still damp. Everyone in the diner was watching now, some curious, others whispering things under their breath. The waitress leaned on the counter, unsure of what to expect. He sat down, pressed a few keys, and winced slightly at the sound. Then he took a deep breath and placed his fingers on the keyboard. The first few notes were soft, almost hesitant, like he was trying to remember something long forgotten. Then suddenly the melody grew stronger. The sound that filled the diner was unlike anything anyone had heard there before. The music was gentle but powerful, telling a story without words. It was the kind of tune that seemed to reach inside and touch something deep, something human. The waitress froze. Her eyes widened as she watched his hands move across the keys with grace and confidence. Every note was full of feeling, joy, sadness, hope, and pain all woven together. One by one, the conversations in the diner stopped. The only sound was the piano. Even the rain outside seemed quieter, as if it was listening too. The cook peeked out from the kitchen window, and a couple sitting by the window turned their chairs to face him. The man's body swayed slightly as he played, completely lost in the music. For a moment it was as if he wasn't the same person who had walked in moments ago, cold and shivering. He was someone else, someone who belonged to the piano. When he finally lifted his hands from the keys, there was silence. Then slowly people began to clap. It wasn't polite clapping. It was real heartfelt applause that filled the small diner with warmth. The man bowed his head slightly, his eyes glistening. The waitress felt something rise in her chest, pride maybe or awe. She walked up to him holding a plate of hot food. "I think you've more than earned this," she said softly. He looked at the plate, then at her. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said, smiling. "But you played beautifully. You made everyone forget their worries for a few minutes. That's worth more than money." He stared at her for a long moment as if trying to read her thoughts. Then he nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. "For the coffee. For the chance." He started eating quietly, not rushing, savoring every bite. The waitress went back to her counter, but she kept glancing his way. Something about him felt different now. He didn't act like someone broken or lost. There was a quiet strength in him, something she couldn't quite explain. A woman from another table came up to the waitress. "Who is he?" she whispered. The waitress shook her head. "I don't know. He just came in from the rain." "Well," the woman said, smiling, "that was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years." As the night went on, people slowly began to leave, still talking about the mysterious pianist. The diner felt lighter somehow, as if that short performance had cleaned the air of all its usual noise and tiredness. When the place was nearly empty, the man finished his meal and stood up. "Thank you," he said again, walking over to her. "I won't forget your kindness," she smiled. "It's just a meal." He shook his head. "No, it's more than that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small coin, old and worn. He placed it gently on the counter. "Keep this," he said softly. "For luck." Before she could respond, he was already heading toward the door. The bell rang and then he was gone, disappearing into the rain. She picked up the coin and turned it over in her hand. It was old, probably worthless, but for some reason it felt special. She slipped it into her apron pocket and smiled to herself. The manager walked by, muttering, "Well, at least he didn't cause trouble." She looked toward the door and whispered, "He did more good than you think." That night, as she locked up and turned off the lights, she couldn't shake the sound of the music from her mind. It echoed softly in her memory, warm and bittersweet. She didn't know who the man really was or why he had come in that night. But she knew one thing for sure. Something about him, about that moment, had changed the way she saw people forever. When she stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The street was quiet, shining under the glow of the streetlights. She stood for a moment, breathing in the cool air. Somewhere, she thought, the man was walking alone under that same sky. And maybe, just maybe, he would find his way back someday. The next morning, the diner was busier than usual. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the air as people chatted over breakfast. The waitress moved from table to table with her usual smile, but her mind wasn't really there. She kept thinking about the man from the night before, the one who played the piano like he was telling a story straight from his soul. Every time she thought of the music, it gave her chills. It wasn't just beautiful. It had meaning. It had emotion. It had life. She couldn't stop wondering who he was or where he had learned to play like that. When she came to work that morning, she checked the corner of the diner where he had sat. The piano looked the same, a bit dusty and old, but now it felt different. It wasn't just an old piece of furniture anymore. It was a memory, a reminder of something magical that had happened in this small place. Her manager walked in, grumbling about the bills and deliveries. "You remember that guy from last night?" he said suddenly, wiping his hands on a towel. "Of course," she said softly. "The one who played the piano." "Yeah, turns out somebody filmed him," he said. "One of the customers, I think. They posted it online." Her eyes widened. "What? Where?" "Some social media site," he said, shrugging. "I don't use that stuff, but my niece called me this morning. Said there's a video going around, over 100,000 views already." She almost dropped the cup she was holding. "You're kidding." "Nope," he said. "People are calling him the mystery pianist." He gave a small laugh. "Guess our diner's getting famous." All day, customers came in talking about the video. Some of them showed it on their phones. There it was, the same man sitting at that same piano, his hood pulled up, playing the tune that had silenced the whole room. The camera was shaky, but the music still sounded clear. People in the comments were amazed. Some said they cried listening to it. Others said they hoped someone would find him and help him. The waitress couldn't believe it. She had only given him coffee and a plate of food. Now the whole world wanted to know who he was. By the afternoon, reporters started calling the diner. One asked if they could interview the staff. Another wanted to know if the man had come back. Her manager handled the calls, trying to sound important, but she just wanted to make sure the man, wherever he was, knew how much he had touched people. That night, when the diner finally emptied out, she sat at the counter with her phone and watched the video again. She turned up the volume and closed her eyes, letting the notes fill her head. Something about the way he played. It was like he had lived through every sound, every pause, every emotion in the song. She wondered what kind of life could teach someone to play like that. She thought of his old shoes, his damp coat, and those tired eyes that looked like they had seen too much. Maybe he had lost everything. Maybe music was the only thing he had left. She sighed and closed her phone. "I hope you're okay," she whispered to no one. The next few days were strange. More people came to the diner hoping to see the mysterious pianist again. Some asked questions, some just looked around as if expecting him to walk through the door at any moment. The waitress kept glancing at that door too. Every time it opened, her heart skipped a beat. But it was never him. Then one afternoon, just as she was serving a family their lunch, a sleek black car pulled up outside. It stood out immediately. Shiny, new, with tinted windows that didn't belong anywhere near this quiet street. The door opened and a tall man stepped out, wearing a fine suit. He walked with confidence, his shoes shining under the sunlight. Everyone in the diner turned to look. When the doorbell rang, the waitress looked up, and froze. It was him, the same man who had come in drenched and trembling days ago. But now he looked completely different. His hair was neatly brushed, his coat was gone, replaced by a perfectly tailored jacket. His eyes were the same, though, soft and calm, with a trace of sadness still hidden in them. She stood there, her heart racing. For a second, she thought she might be imagining things. He smiled gently and said, "Hello again." The whole diner went silent. Even the cook came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. The manager blinked, confused. You're the piano guy?" The man nodded. "Yes." The waitress finally found her voice. You're not homeless?" He shook his head slowly. "No," he said softly. "Not really. I was testing something." Everyone exchanged puzzled looks. The man smiled kindly and continued. "I've been working on a project to understand what people go through when they lose everything. I wanted to see how the world treats someone who looks like they have nothing. I've spent weeks moving from place to place, living on very little, meeting all kinds of people." He paused, looking around the room. Some turned me away. Some ignored me. But here, his eyes met the waitress's. Someone gave me kindness without asking for anything in return. Her face flushed slightly. "I just gave you food," she said. He smiled. "You gave more than that. You gave respect." The manager cleared his throat awkwardly. "So, you're saying you're not poor?" The man let out a quiet laugh. "No, not poor. I've been lucky in life. I'm a musician and an investor. I have more than I need. But I wanted to remind myself of what matters." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is for you," he said, handing it to the waitress. She looked down at it, confused. "What is this?" "Something to help you," he said. "You've helped me remember something I lost, faith in people's goodness." Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a check. The amount made her heart stop. It was more money than she had seen in her life. She covered her mouth, eyes filling with tears. "I can't take this," she whispered. "Yes, you can," he said gently. "It's not charity. It's a thank you." She shook her head, still overwhelmed. "I didn't do anything special," he smiled again. "That's the thing. Kindness never thinks it's special, but it changes everything." The people in the diner started clapping softly. Some even wiped away tears. The manager, who had once told her not to serve the man, looked down, embarrassed. The man turned to him and said kindly, "You run a good place. Maybe keep that piano tuned. You never know when music will walk through your doors again." The manager nodded awkwardly. "Yes, sir. I will." Then the man looked back at the waitress. I'm opening a small foundation for struggling artists and single parents. I'd like you to be part of it if you're willing." She blinked in shock. "Me? Why?" "Because you see people, not just faces," he said. "That's rare," her heart swelled. She didn't know what to say. I don't even know your name," he smiled softly. "Just call me a friend." And with that, he turned and walked toward the door. The whole diner followed him with their eyes as he stepped outside, got into the black car, and drove away. For a long time, no one said anything. The waitress stood still, holding the envelope to her chest. Then she looked toward the piano and smiled. That night, when she finally went home, she placed the envelope on her table and sat quietly for a while. She thought about how quickly life could change, how one small act of kindness could ripple outward and come back in ways no one could ever imagine. She went to sleep that night with a peaceful heart. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like something good was about to begin. The next morning, when she arrived at work, a new sign had been placed above the piano. It read, "Music is the voice of the soul, and kindness is its echo." She smiled when she saw it. The old piano looked brighter somehow, as if the man's touch had given it life again. Every time a customer asked about the sign or the story behind it, she would tell them about that rainy night, the night a man walked in with nothing and left behind a lesson worth more than gold. And every time she spoke of him, she would touch the small coin he had given her, the lucky coin that she now kept safely in her pocket, and whisper softly, "Thank you," because deep down she knew that moment wasn't an accident. It was fate. A few days passed after the man's visit, but his presence still lingered in the diner like a soft melody that wouldn't fade. The waitress couldn't stop thinking about him, the way he smiled, the calmness in his voice, and how the piano had come alive beneath his hands. It felt like something out of a dream, something that couldn't possibly happen in her simple little world. Every day people came in asking about him. Some had seen the video, others had read articles online. News channels had started running short stories about the homeless pianist who turned out to be a millionaire. The waitress didn't care much about his money. What stayed with her was his kindness, the way he spoke to her like she mattered, the way he said that kindness had reminded him of something he'd lost. She often looked at the envelope he'd given her. It was now tucked safely in a drawer at home. She hadn't touched the money yet. Something inside her told her it wasn't meant for spending carelessly. It was meant for something important, though she didn't yet know what that was. One evening after her shift ended, she stayed behind to clean the diner. The piano in the corner caught her eye again. The sign above it, "Music is the voice of the soul, and kindness is its echo," looked beautiful in the dim light. She wiped the dust from the piano keys and pressed one. The sound that came out was soft but sweet. She smiled, wondering if she could learn to play even a little. Maybe it would make her feel closer to that moment, closer to him. The doorbell jingled behind her, startling her. She turned quickly and froze. It was him again. He was dressed casually this time, in jeans and a simple jacket. He carried no air of importance, just the same gentle smile she remembered. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said, walking in. She shook her head quickly. "No, not at all. I just didn't expect to see you again." He chuckled softly. "I thought I'd stop by. You didn't think I'd forget about my favorite diner, did you?" She smiled, still trying to process his sudden appearance. "You're full of surprises." "Maybe," he said, "but I came with an idea. Remember what I said about opening something for artists and single parents?" "Yes," she said quietly. "Well," he continued, "I've been thinking, instead of some big formal place, why not start small? Something warm, real, like this diner. A place where people can eat, listen to music, and feel human again." Her eyes widened. "You mean like a cafe?" He nodded. "Exactly. A cafe where anyone can walk in, where music plays freely and no one is judged by how they look or what they have. I want you to help me build it." She blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "Me?" "Yes, you," he said simply. "You're the reason I'm doing this. That night when everyone else looked away, you saw me. You believed in kindness. That's the spirit I want this cafe to have." Her throat tightened. "But I don't know anything about running a business." He smiled. "You know how to treat people, right? That's more than most people ever learn." She laughed softly, half in disbelief, half in joy. "You really mean this?" He nodded. I already found a small place downtown. Needs work, but it has charm. I'll handle the cost. You help design the feeling of it. Deal?" For a moment, she just stood there, speechless. Then, with tears in her eyes, she said, "Deal." The following weeks were a whirlwind. The man kept his word. He arranged everything. The little space he'd found was an old bakery that had closed years ago. It had peeling paint, creaky floors, and windows that needed replacing. But when she stepped inside, she could already imagine it. The smell of fresh coffee, the soft hum of a piano, the laughter of people finding comfort there. Together they worked day after day. She helped choose the colors for the walls, the wooden tables, and the small corner where a piano would sit, just like the one in the diner. Sometimes, when the day got long, the man would sit at that piano and play while the workers painted and cleaned. His music made everyone smile. Even the electricians and carpenters paused their work just to listen. As they worked side by side, she learned more about him. He told her he had once been a famous pianist touring all over the world. But fame had cost him everything: his family, his peace, his joy. One day he had just walked away from it all. "I had money, but I felt empty," he said one afternoon, his fingers idly tracing the piano keys. "Then I started this little project, to see if I could find real kindness again. I never expected to find it here in a diner, from someone who barely had enough for herself." She looked at him with a gentle smile. Sometimes the people who have less understand giving more. He nodded quietly, as if her words touched something deep inside. Weeks passed, and the cafe started to take shape. They named it the Second Note. The sign hung proudly above the door, painted in gold letters. Inside, the lights were warm and soft. Shelves were filled with donated books, paintings from local artists, and old records that played gentle tunes. At the heart of it all stood a piano, polished, shining, and full of promise. On opening night, the small cafe was packed. People from the town came, some who had seen the viral video, others who just wanted to see what the fuss was about. The man stood quietly near the piano, watching as laughter and chatter filled the air. The waitress, now co-owner, moved among the tables, making sure everyone felt welcome. When the time came for the first performance, the man sat at the piano. The room grew still. He looked at her once, smiled, and began to play. The music flowed like a story, gentle, heartfelt, filled with everything they had lived through together. The people listened in silence, some holding hands, some wiping tears. When he finished, there was a long pause, then thunderous applause. The waitress stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly. "This place exists because one man reminded me that kindness can change lives. And I hope everyone who walks through these doors feels the same way, seen, heard, and loved." That night, after the last customer left, they sat together in the quiet cafe, just listening to the rain tapping on the windows. The lights were dim and the smell of coffee still hung in the air. She looked at him and said softly, "You know, I think this place will help a lot of people." He smiled, looking around. "It already has. It helped me." They sat there for a while, saying nothing more. Sometimes silence said everything words couldn't. Over the next few months, the Second Note became more than just a cafe. It became a community. People came not only for food and coffee, but for comfort. Struggling musicians played their songs there. Lonely souls found company. Strangers became friends. The waitress had never felt so proud in her life. Every morning when she opened the doors, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. Sometimes when the cafe was quiet, she would sit at the piano and press a few keys. She wasn't very good, but she was learning. And every time she played, she thought of that night in the diner. The rain, the music, the stranger who turned out to be a miracle in disguise. One evening, as she was closing up, the man came by again. He looked tired but peaceful. "I'm heading out for a while," he said. "There are other towns, other stories waiting. But I'll come back." She nodded, trying not to show her sadness. "Promise?" He smiled. "I always keep my promises." Before leaving, he handed her a small box. Inside was a golden key. "For the cafe," he said. "It's yours now. You made it what it is." Her eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled and said, "No, thank you, for reminding me what music really means." Then he turned and walked out into the night, his figure fading slowly into the distance. She stood at the door long after he was gone, holding the key close to her heart. She didn't know when he would return, but she knew one thing for sure. His music, his kindness, and his lesson would never leave her. The piano stood silent in the corner, waiting for the next melody to be born. And as she turned off the lights, the cafe glowed softly in the dark, like a promise kept alive by kindness and the sound of one unforgettable song. The cafe. The second note had been open for a few months now, and it had become a place of warmth and hope in the town. People came from near and far, some looking for a hot meal, others for a place to sit and listen to music, and many just looking for a friendly face. The waitress, now a co-owner, moved through the space with a gentle smile, greeting everyone and making sure they felt at home. The little cafe had more life than she had ever imagined. The piano in the corner was played almost every evening. Musicians who couldn't afford lessons came to practice. Some were young and shy, their fingers trembling on the keys. Others were older, tired from life, but still full of stories to tell through music. The cafe welcomed them all. Every morning she would unlock the door and take a moment to look around. The tables were clean, the lights shone softly, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. The small walls of the cafe were decorated with pictures and paintings donated by local artists. On the shelves, books waited for someone to pick them up and lose themselves in their pages. It was more than a cafe now. It was a home. One day, as she was setting out the chairs, a young man came in. He looked nervous and hesitant. His clothes were worn, and he shifted from foot to foot as he looked around. "Hello," she said softly, walking toward him. "Can I help you?" He nodded quickly. I heard about this place. People said it's special. I don't have much, but I can play a little music. Maybe I could try." She smiled warmly. "Of course. Everyone is welcome here. Go ahead." He made his way to the piano in the corner. His fingers were unsure at first, hitting a few wrong notes, but slowly he found the rhythm. He played a soft, simple tune. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. The sound filled the cafe like sunlight breaking through clouds. The co-owner watched him, her heart swelling. She remembered the night the man had first come to the diner, playing that unforgettable song that had changed everything. She understood now. Sometimes music wasn't about skill, it was about the feeling it carried. By the time he finished, a few customers had stopped talking, listening in silence. When he looked up, she clapped first, then others followed. His face lit up in surprise and gratitude. "That's beautiful," she said. "Thank you for sharing," he smiled shyly. I never thought anyone would care to listen." "That's what this place is for," she said softly. "Everyone deserves to be heard." Later that day, she found a letter slipped under the door. It was from the man who had come to the diner months ago, the millionaire who had changed her life. She opened it carefully. "Dear friend," the letter began, "I can't tell you how proud I am of what you've done. You took kindness and turned it into something real, something that helps people. I've been following from a distance, and I see the lives you've touched. I don't need to be there. The cafe is yours now, in spirit as much as in reality. Keep it alive, keep it kind, and remember, sometimes the smallest acts of love grow into the greatest things. You've done that, and I know you'll do even more." She held the letter close to her chest, tears filling her eyes. The man had never asked for anything in return, yet he had given her the most important gift: belief in herself. The following weeks were busy. The cafe had become a hub for community events. Local musicians performed on weekends, sometimes inviting strangers to join them. Families came in for breakfast and lunch. Homeless people and travelers found a safe place to rest and eat. The co-owner made sure that no one felt out of place. Everyone belonged. One rainy afternoon, she was serving a bowl of soup to a man who had no money, just like the first man she had helped. He looked down at the floor, ashamed, and whispered, "I'm sorry, I have nothing to pay." She shook her head gently. "You don't need to pay. Just enjoy your meal." He looked up at her with surprise, then gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly. "No one has ever treated me like this before." She smiled. Everyone deserves kindness. It reminded her of the night he had come to the diner, and she realized something important. Her life had changed not because of money or fame, but because of simple acts of kindness that she had never thought mattered. The man who had come to the diner had shown her that one small act could create a ripple. And now, seeing the cafe full of laughter and music, she saw the ripple spreading farther than she could have imagined. One evening, the man returned. She hadn't expected to see him so soon, and the sight of him made her heart beat faster. He walked in quietly, smiling as he looked around. "You did it," he said softly. "This place, it's amazing." She smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "We did it," she corrected. He nodded. "Yes, you helped make it happen. You gave people hope, and that's more valuable than anything I could ever give." They sat together in a quiet corner, listening to the soft hum of conversation and the piano in the corner. The cafe was alive with life, full of people who had come seeking something, comfort, music, or just a friendly face. "I'm glad I came back," he said after a while, "to see this, to see what kindness can do." She looked at him, tears brimming in her eyes. I never imagined it could grow into this. It started with just a cup of coffee," he smiled, "and a song. One song can open hearts. You opened more than just hearts. You opened a place where people can belong." For a long moment they sat in silence. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. "This is for you," he said. "Not for the cafe, but for your dreams. You've earned it." She opened it carefully. Inside was another check along with a note. "Use it to build your life as you've built this place. Keep spreading kindness. Keep believing." She felt tears spill over. I don't know what to say," he smiled softly. "You don't need to say anything. Just keep being you." Over the next few days, she thought about the letter, the envelope, and everything that had happened. She realized that life could change in an instant, for the better or worse, and that kindness was the most powerful tool anyone could have. The cafe continued to grow. People who had once felt invisible found a place to be seen. Musicians who had lost hope found a place to play. Families who had struggled to make ends meet found comfort in a warm meal and a listening ear. And every day she thought of the man who had walked into the diner on that rainy night. He had taught her that the smallest act could spark a chain reaction of goodness. And she had passed it on, one plate of food, one smile, one song at a time. One evening, as the rain fell softly outside, she found herself sitting at the piano. She pressed the keys gently, feeling the music rise from the instrument. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and it carried a story of kindness, hope, and change. She closed her eyes and let the melody flow, thinking of all the people who had found a little piece of peace here. She thought of the man who had given her a chance when she had least expected it, and she whispered softly, "Thank you," because she knew that without him, none of this would have been possible. And now, with the cafe full of life and music, she understood that kindness wasn't just about giving food or money. It was about seeing people, believing in them, and giving them a chance to shine. And in that quiet, glowing cafe, she felt a deep sense of joy. Not because of money, not because of fame, but because she had created a place where hope lived, and where everyone, no matter who they were, could belong. Time moved quickly, but the cafe, the second note, remained a constant place of warmth and light in the town. The little space had grown far beyond what the waitress had ever imagined. Families came in to share meals, musicians practiced their songs, and travelers found a place to rest. It wasn't just a cafe anymore. It had become a home for everyone who needed it. The co-owner walked through the space every morning, unlocking the doors and taking a moment to look around. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft sound of a piano playing in the corner. Sometimes she played herself slowly and carefully, learning new melodies as she went. Every note reminded her of the man who had first come to the diner that rainy night. She remembered how timid he had been, how carefully he had treated the piano, and how his music had filled the room with something pure and alive. The story of the mysterious pianist had spread far and wide, but she no longer thought about fame or money. What mattered was what had grown from that night, a place where people could belong and be seen. She had learned that kindness, even in the smallest forms, had the power to change lives. One chilly morning, as she arranged the tables and polished the counter, a young woman walked in carrying a guitar. Her eyes were nervous and her hands trembled slightly. I heard about this cafe," she said softly. "I don't have anywhere else to play. Can I try?" The co-owner smiled warmly. "Of course. Everyone is welcome here. Just go ahead." The young woman walked to the piano corner, set her guitar down, and began to play. Her voice was soft at first, almost uncertain, but as the song went on, it grew stronger. The customers stopped talking, listening intently to the music that told a story of hope, struggle, and dreams yet to come. The co-owner felt a familiar warmth rise in her chest. She thought of that first night, the man in the rain, and how he had played his song with honesty and feeling. Now she saw the same thing happening with someone else, a young person given a chance, encouraged to share their heart through music. When the song ended, the cafe erupted in applause. The young woman blushed, unsure of how to respond, and the co-owner walked over to her. "You were amazing," she said softly. "Thank you for sharing your music." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "No one has ever told me that before," she whispered. "That's what this place is for," the co-owner said. "Everyone deserves to be heard, and everyone deserves a chance to shine." That night, after the cafe had emptied and the lights were dimmed, she sat at the piano. Her fingers moved slowly over the keys, and she played a melody she had learned from memory. The music carried the story of all that had happened. The man who had come to the diner, the kindness that had started it all, and the hope that had grown in this small space. As she played, she felt a sense of peace she had never known. The cafe wasn't just a business, it was a legacy of human goodness. She thought of the man again, the millionaire who had once been homeless, and she smiled. He had trusted her with more than money. He had trusted her with a dream. Weeks later, a letter arrived for her. She opened it carefully and found a note from him, along with a small photograph of the night he had first played at the diner. The note read, "Dear friend, I watched from afar as your cafe grew. I saw the people you helped, the musicians you encouraged, and the lives you touched. I am proud of you. What you have created is more than I ever imagined, a place where hope lives and kindness thrives. Thank you for giving the world a little more light." She held the note close, tears filling her eyes. Even though he was not physically there, she felt his presence in every corner of the cafe. His gift had not been money, but faith. Faith in her, in humanity, and in the power of simple acts of kindness. The cafe continued to grow. Every week brought new faces and new stories. There were people who had come hungry and left with full hearts. There were musicians who had discovered their talent for the first time. There were lonely souls who had found a friend in the co-owner, someone who cared enough to see them for who they were. One rainy evening, much like the night the man had first walked into the diner, the co-owner stood near the door and looked outside. A figure appeared through the mist, hooded and quiet. Her heart skipped a beat as she watched him approach. It was him. He had come back. He entered the cafe with a gentle smile and looked around. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "You've made it more than I could have imagined." She smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "Welcome back. It's because of you that this exists." He shook his head. "No, it's because of you. You saw someone in need and acted. You turned kindness into action, and that action became something real. I just gave you a little push. The rest was yours." They walked through the cafe together, seeing families laughing, musicians practicing, and travelers sharing stories. Every corner was alive with warmth and light. The co-owner felt proud, not of herself, but of the ripple that had started with one small act. Giving food to a stranger who had no money, giving him a chance to share his music. The man paused near the piano and looked at her. "Do you remember the first night I played here?" She nodded, smiling softly. "I'll never forget it. I came in with nothing," he said. "But you treated me like a person. You gave me hope, and now you've done the same for so many others. That's the true magic." She felt a warmth in her chest. "It's not magic," she said softly. "It's kindness. That's all it is." He smiled, his eyes reflecting the soft light of the cafe. "Kindness is magic in disguise," he said. "And you've shown it to everyone who walks through these doors." They sat together in the quiet corner, listening to the soft hum of conversation and the piano in the corner. The cafe was full of life, yet peaceful at the same time. The co-owner thought about how far they had come, from a small diner on a rainy night to a place that had become a home for so many. She thought about the first man she had helped, and how his music had changed everything. She thought about the letters, the envelopes, the check, and the trust he had given her. But most of all, she thought about the people who had come to the cafe and left with hope. The man reached into his pocket and handed her a small key. "For you," he said. "This is yours now. Not just for the cafe, but for everything it represents. Keep it safe and keep spreading the kindness that started it all." She took the key carefully, feeling its weight. "I will," she said softly, tears streaming down her face. He smiled, standing up. "I'll be back," he said. "There are other places that need a little hope too. But this cafe, it's yours. You've given it life." As he walked out into the rainy night, she stood at the door watching him disappear. She felt a mixture of sadness and joy. Sadness because he was leaving again, but joy because she knew that what he had started with her would continue to grow. That night, after locking the doors, she sat at the piano and played. The notes carried the story of that first rainy night, the stranger who had changed her life, and the kindness that had grown into something greater than she could have imagined. She played softly, imagining the people who would come tomorrow, the songs that would be played, and the lives that would be touched. Every note was a reminder that one small act of goodness could ripple outward, changing the world in ways no one could predict. The co-owner closed her eyes, letting the music fill her heart. She whispered softly, "Thank you," to the man who had started it all, to the people who had walked through her doors, and to life itself, because she knew that the cafe was more than a place to eat or listen to music. It was a testament to kindness, to faith in people, and to the idea that one person's small act of love could spark something extraordinary. And as she played the last note of the evening, the piano echoed softly in the empty cafe. It carried a story of hope, compassion, and the power of seeing the good in others. It was a story that would continue to grow, just as the music would, filling hearts for generations to come. The cafe glowed softly in the dark, a beacon of warmth in a world that often forgot to pause and see the beauty in simple acts. And in that quiet glow, she knew one thing for certain. Kindness, when given freely, could change everything. It had changed her life, and it would continue to change the lives of everyone who walked through the second note's doors.